Good evening and welcome along to MesmePolitics. My name is Toby Joshua and we are live with you for the next half hour, possibly more today. It's a busy show with all the latest in UK and US politics from a leftist perspective. There's a lot to dig into. There is a lot going on today. So it's just gone 7 p.m. on Wednesday, the 30th of December 2020. Tomorrow is the penultimate episode in the Brexit saga, and coming up we will of course be talking about Brexit. Also on the show, COVID-19, new measures regarding schools, new measures regarding lockdowns, what the state of play is, just your daily update in the farce that is the government's response to COVID-19 in Britain. I want to talk to you about Mitch McConnell and how he is now the only thing standing between hardworking Americans and $2,000 stimulus checks. It's passed the House, it could pass the Senate. Mitch McConnell is the obstacle. How to fight that? And just what an absolute disgrace Mitch McConnell is. Political bottom feeder. But now, at the top of the show, the Brexit deal has passed the House of Commons. Boris Johnson's Brexit trade deal. The deal is done. It is over. Result of the vote, aye, 521, no, 73. It's a majority of 448 votes. About 30 odd Labour MPs, including Jeremy Corbyn, abstained. One Labour MP voted against, about 160 voted for. Basically every Conservative voted for it. Minimal abstained. Two Conservative MPs abstained. The SNP and the Liberal Democrats voted against the thing. It is passed. It is now law. Jeremy Corbyn says, I cannot vote for this deal, which this government will use to drive down rights and protections and step up the sell-off of our vital public services. We need instead to break with failed race-to-the-bottom policies and build a Britain that puts people before private profit. So, big irony of Corbyn, left-wing Eurosceptic, opposing this deal because, as we all know, it's a dreadful deal, and that is the principal position to take. It's not a politically smart thing to do, though, and I will elaborate further on that. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer has taken the right decision, I'd say. He's voted for the deal. This is a big win for Boris Johnson. It's voted through the House of Commons now. He has described it as not a rupture, but a resolution. The bill could continue to the House of Lords, is expected to be given royal assent shortly before midnight. So, of course, Parliament was recalled for an emergency one-day session to approve the EU-UK trade and cooperation agreement concluded by Johnson and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen on Christmas Eve. Get in touch throughout the show at any point in the chat. Here's Boris Johnson.
Welcome the outstanding news that AstraZeneca is now rolling out a new UK-made vaccine approved by the MHRA that offers the hope to millions in this country and around the world. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the bill be now read a second time. And having taken back control of our money, our borders, our laws and our waters by leaving the European Union on January the 31st, we now seize this moment to forge a fantastic new relationship with our European neighbours based on free trade and friendly cooperation. And in a minute, Mr. Speaker, at the heart of this bill is one of the biggest free trade agreements in the world, a comprehensive. I will happily give way.
Point of order in Blackburn.
Mr. Speaker, I'm seeking your clarification. I'm just wondering how on earth the Prime Minister...
The right honourable, I do feel I must correct him, because not only will we take back control of our waters, we will increase Scottish fishermen's share of all the relevant stocks. Cod, for instance, going up by 47% to 57%. North Sea haddock going up by 70% to 84%. That's just next year, Mr. Speaker. And in 5.5 years' time, we take control of the entire spectacular marine wealth of Scotland. It is only the Scottish Nationalist Party, Mr. Speaker, that would hand back control of the waters of this country to the UK with spectacular hypocrisy, Mr. Speaker. And indeed, having said, no, Mr. Speaker, having said that they would.
Sorry, it is a point of order. Point of order in Bradford.
And could you point out to the Prime Minister that the name of my party is the Scottish National Party?
In fairness, I have pointed it out in the past. It is the Scottish Nationalist Party, Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I wish the right honourable gentleman to know that I am using the word nationalist with a small n, and I don't think that he would disagree with that, which is semantically justifiable, I think, under the circumstances. And yet, in spite of that nomenclature, Mr. Speaker, they would hand back control of Scotland's waters and go back into the common fisheries policy. What this bill does, Mr. Speaker, is take back control. Absolutely not. Take back control of the spectacular marine wealth of Scotland and the rest of the UK. Because just in a moment, in the heart of this bill is one of the biggest free trade agreements in the world, as we've discussed in this chamber many times, Mr. Speaker, a comprehensive Canada-style deal worth over £660 billion, which, if anything, should allow companies to do even more business with our European friends, safeguarding millions of jobs and livelihoods in our UK and across the continent. In less than 48 hours, we will leave the EU single market and the customs union as we promised, and yet British exporters will not face a sudden thicket of trade barriers, but rather, for the first time in the history of EU agreements, zero tariffs and zero quotas.
So that's Boris Johnson there. Keir Starmer voting with the deal. Big political statement. Here we go.
It's often said there's nothing simple about Brexit, but the choice before the House today is perfectly simple. Do we implement the treaty that has been agreed with the EU, or do we not? That is the choice. If we choose not to, the outcome is clear. We leave the transition period without a deal on security, on trade, on fisheries, without protection for our manufacturing sector, for farming, for countless British businesses, and without a foothold to build a future relationship with the EU. Anyone choosing that option today knows there is no time to renegotiate. There's no better deal coming in the next 24 hours, no extensions, no humble addresses, no SO24s. So choosing that option leads to one place: no deal. Or we can take the only other option that is available and implement the treaty that has been negotiated. Now, this is a thin deal. It's got many flaws, and I'll come to that in a moment. But I will in just a minute. But a thin deal is better than no deal. And not implementing this deal would mean immediate tariffs and quotas with the EU.
So that's Keir Starmer making his case for voting with the deal. Meanwhile, quite extraordinary intervention from Theresa May.
I welcome this deal and I will be supporting it today. And I welcome the fact that the official opposition will be supporting this deal. But I did listen with some incredulity to what the Leader of the Opposition said. He said he wanted a better deal. He had the opportunity in early 2019, when there was the opportunity of a better deal on the table, and he voted against it. So I will take no lectures from the Leader of the Opposition on this deal.
And she's not wrong. She's not wrong. It will be consigned to history that a more conciliatory, softer Brexit was very much within reach, but the People's Vote fanatics decided that that was not a compromise they were willing to make. Keir Starmer's decision to vote with the deal, however duplicitous and hypocritical, is overwhelmingly backed by the public. It is the right decision. Labour voters, 43% to 21%, back voting with the deal. Remain voters, 50% to 19%. Obviously, Conservative and Leave support for that is high. The public overall, 55% to 15%, support voting with the deal. There we go. People want Brexit done, people want it put to bed, and this has shown Labour willing to do such a thing. A final note, little write-up on Labour. Labour will make a clean break from its divisions over Europe and will not seek major changes to the UK's relationship with the EU. Keir Starmer has told The Guardian, vowing to shift Labour's focus to Britain in the 2030s rather than the battles of 2016. Evoking Tony Blair's election slogan of forward not back, on the eve of the vote on the post-Brexit trade deal, Starmer said he wanted to lead a party that was focused on the future, saying it was unlikely Europe would even feature on his party's leaflets. He said, I've been up to my ears in the details of the Brexit negotiations. I've read everything available on all the negotiating positions and the details of them. We had a very, very good idea what this deal was going to look like, born of 4 years of studying every twist and turn this way. If you vote against it, you're voting for no deal. That's the SNP's inexplicable position. The consequences of that, if they succeed, will be no deal. We vote tomorrow in the mindset of the next general election in 2024. If we come into government in 2024, and I hope we do, we will inherit this deal. The public in Britain would expect us to make this deal work. So a huge rupture from Keir Starmer's previous positions on Brexit. This is done now. Brexit is, for all intents and purposes, actually done. Pending any changes to our settlement with Europe, it's likely a Labour government would at least make some tweaks. But it is done. Hard Brexit is the new settlement. We have to make it work. And the left has to propose ways of making this work, of taking advantage of the divergence and pushing back against the race to the bottom that a Tory-driven Brexit poses, the risks that a Tory-led Brexit poses. The public want this done, as I say. The polls indicate that. Keir Starmer has been vindicated. This could be a defining moment in Keir Starmer's leadership. Starmer is being duplicitous, hugely duplicitous. It's still the right move. Two things can be true at once. This is the right move, it's the right political strategy, but at the same time, the hypocrisy of the man who wouldn't compromise on, a soft Brexit and wanted Labour to be the party of Remain, and the part that most of the PLP and the People's Vote people are now lining up saying Starmer's a sensible grown-up, but when Corbyn was saying the same stuff about respecting the referendum result and a jobs-first Brexit, they spat in his face and called him a Farage-ist hard Brexiteer. It's right that he's done this. It's right because there is not strong sentiment from Remainers against backing this deal at this point. People are resigned to it, so it's a win-win. Keir Starmer, the Tories own this, but Keir Starmer is putting to bed issues of contention with Leave voters and detoxifying himself in the Red Wall. And at the same time, it is absolutely crucial Labour must not alienate young voters, urban voters, minorities who opposed leaving the EU overwhelmingly, primarily, particularly the young, primarily on a values basis. Not an analysis of global trade, but a values basis of they saw Nigel Farage whipping up hatred. They saw Boris Johnson invoking tropes and they said, I must be on the other side of this. I must oppose this. And that's why the young are overwhelmingly in favour of EU membership. And that's why Keir Starmer, at his peril, pisses off these people. They support Labour conditionally. They vote with their values. And they are the future of the British electorate. And they are the future of Labour's base. They gave Labour 32% of the vote in what was a bleak electoral result. Bigger share of the vote than Ed Miliband got in 2015. Starmer annoys these people at his peril. If he does, he loses seats. Simple as that. This is a big political win for Boris Johnson. Huge. The right-wing sort of elements of Vote Leave, the elements that Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson were associated with. Primarily Nigel Farage. Boris Johnson just hitched his wagon to it. But that segment of politics, right-wing libertarian Euroscepticism, has won the day. They've not only won Brexit, the argument of what sort of Brexit we have, they've also won the British politics. They now run the government. And it is, if I was on that side of politics, I would be jumping for joy. My political faction is now everywhere. Obviously, that's not the political faction I belong to, but it is just extraordinary, the win that these people have amassed for themselves. And a final note on Jeremy Corbyn voting against the deal. The problem with the left voting against the deal is twofold. First of all, it alienates them from the leadership yet further. It's not really where you want to break with the leadership. But secondly, it drives a ram between the left and communities in the Red Wall and the communities that Labour alienated and wants to win back. And the problem with that is it stumps them. It confirms that Corbyn and the Corbyn faction are the people trying to block Brexit, and that Keir Starmer is somehow the person standing up for Brexit. Well, whereas it's actually the other way round in terms of, the left were very sensible with whether they were for Lexit or Remain and Reform. They're very sensible in handling it, whereas the right of the Labour Party were fanatically for Remain, even going against democracy. But it paints a really bad picture, and it sort of separates the left and isolates them from the country. It sets them against the national mood. The only upside of that is it probably puts them in the good books of young Remainers, and Jeremy Corbyn is opposing this on the basis that it's a bad deal. It goes against his values. It is a bad deal. It goes against my values. But it is where we are. It's better than no deal. It's also likely better than continued membership of the EU. Not economically, but just purely the fact we're out of the EU will be a good thing. So, next story on the show. Get in touch at any point with your thoughts in the chat, by the way. Next story of the day, Mitch McConnell is blocking relief for hardworking Americans. Senator Mitch McConnell blocked an attempt by Democrats on Tuesday to hold an immediate vote on increasing stimulus checks to £2,000 from $600, leaving the fate of the measure unclear as President Trump continued to demand the larger payouts and more Republicans publicly endorsed the idea. So this continues. We talked about this a bit yesterday. McConnell is the one blocking all this. A quick report from CNBC television.
Let's get an update on the stimulus right now. Those payments to individuals are on the way, but they will be $600, not $2,000, after Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell blocked what would have been the quickest path to increasing those to $2,000 payments. There's a lot of political gamesmanship that's taking place right now. Eamon Javers is in the midst of this. He's been covering all of it, and he joins us right now with more. Eamon, this has been something to watch.
Yeah, it is, Becky. The good news here is that Treasury says it's able to begin direct deposits on the $600 checks you just mentioned. So that process is underway. The direct deposits are happening. The paper checks will happen as well. But in terms of that increase from $600 to $2,000, that's something that the president announced that he, in fact, supported. Democrats said, okay, if you support it, we'll pass it. They moved it through the House of Representatives with a 2/3 majority, with a bunch of Republicans voting with the Democrats because President Trump had encouraged them to. All of that gave Senator Chuck Schumer, the Democrat in the Senate, the idea that he might be able to bring that directly to the floor yesterday. He tried to do that, and Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader there, blocked him. Senate Republicans do not like the idea of these $2,000 checks. They've said that they think it's too much money, especially in a time of deficit spending, so there are concerns around that. McConnell saying, though, that he's got a new plan. He's going to put together this idea of getting together the $2,000 checks with a measure to repeal Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. That's the social media provision that the president's been tweeting about that protects social media companies from liability for things that people post online. So that's going to be a non-starter. And then also McConnell adding in the idea of an election security commission that would look at allegations of election fraud when we know.
You see, we know Democrats won't vote for this. Shame on Mitch McConnell for denying Americans the relief that they need. It's not Donald Trump. It's not the Democrats. It is Mitch McConnell and the majority of Senate Republicans. But if it went to the floor, the Senate would vote it through. $2,000 checks should be the bare minimum in a situation such as this. Will this have an impact on the Georgia Senate runoffs? It remains to be seen. Logically, it should, but it's so polarised and so tribal and so much about getting out the base. Maybe tribalism will win the day and it won't actually switch anyone one way or the other. Highly likely. The post-Trump Republican Party is nothing to desire, by the way. I know people keep talking about, once Trump is gone, they won't be as bad. Actually, there'll be more deficit hawkery. There'll be more obstructionism. There'll be more crying about God knows what culture war play. The GOP without Donald Trump is a regressive, economically illiterate, hypocritical, shameful, sometimes extreme political party that has no place in the corridors of power. And that will remain the case, and they'll be better at being awful with Trump gone, because the next Trump will be far more effective. So whether it's neoconservatism or whether it's Trumpian populism, evil and horrific. Horrific for the country, horrific for the economy, horrific for the body politic of the United States. A lot of these Republican operatives, same with Democratic operatives, but a lot of these really particularly Mitch McConnell-style heartless Republicans are objectively what they're doing. You know, the cruelty of the simple act of denying people money. These are objectively bad people doing an objectively bad thing. An overwhelming majority of people on all political sides of the argument would agree with that, I would say. This thing would pass if it was brought to the floor. As I say, it would pass. They won't do it because they're crying about the deficit, even though Republicans, not that I'm engaging in deficit hawkery, but Republicans are worse on the deficit than Democrats. So I don't know what you're shouting about. They weren't shouting about it when we were doing all those tax cuts for the wealthy. I rest my case. Now, Matt Hancock has been speaking. Of course, the new vaccine has been brought through. There is a new vaccine approved. But also, Matt Hancock has been talking about the new measures that are being placed across the UK. Millions more people in England will be placed under stay-at-home orders from New Year's Eve. The government has confirmed after the new variant of COVID-19 contributed to a record rise in infections across the country. So 75% of England, including all of the North East, Greater Manchester, large parts of the Midlands and the South West, will be in the strictest Tier 4 rules from Thursday morning. They will join nearly 24 million people in England already under the stay-at-home restrictions, meaning the closure of non-essential shops and strict one-to-one outdoor meetings limits between households. Daily deaths, 414. Daily cases, 55,000. Up 16,000 in the last week. Total deaths, 71,000. We are in dire straits. Let's hear Matt Hancock.
Mr. Speaker, today marks a great stride forward in our plan to get us out of this pandemic and to return to normal life. Our strategy throughout has been to suppress the virus until a vaccine can make us safe. Suppressing the virus has got a whole lot harder because of the new variant, and we must take more action today. But the vaccine is the route out of this crisis, and the approval this morning of the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine is another world first for Britain.
This is nationalism and vaccine exceptionalism aside. This is an excellent thing because it is going to be much easier to transport than the Pfizer one, for example. This helps the effort. This is good.
And it's the single biggest stride that we've been able to take since this pandemic began. It's almost exactly a year since we first heard about what we now know of as COVID-19 circulating in Wuhan in China. Within weeks, the scientists at Porton Down had sequenced the viral genome, and scientists at Oxford University's Jenner Institute received the genetic code for the new virus. And a bit like the great British code breakers before them, they set to work at lightning speed. We took the decision to back them from the start with funding and access to the NHS for clinical trials, and partnered with AstraZeneca, who've done a brilliant job to develop and manufacture a safe and effective vaccine at speed. The Vaccines Task Force, AstraZeneca, of course, and Oxford University, and all the volunteers who stepped up for science and took part in the trial, and all those who've been involved in making this happen. From the beginning, we've focused on the vaccine as a way out of this pandemic and not apart. And the great news is people get protection after the first dose. This means we can accelerate the speed at which we can vaccinate people for the first 12 weeks before we return to deliver the second doses for that longer-term protection. It brings forward the day on which we can lift the restrictions that no one in this House wants to see any longer than are absolutely necessary. But, Mr. Speaker, we must act to suppress the virus now, not least because the new variant makes the time between now and then even more difficult. And so, whilst we have the good news of the vaccine today, we also have to take some difficult decisions. The NHS is under very significant pressure. There are over 21,000 people in hospital with coronavirus right now, and we can see the impact that this is having. The threat to life from this virus is real, and the pressures on the NHS are real too.
So, new measures in place. It does amount to a chocolate fireguard, massive inaction from the government, but welcome steps forward, particularly on schools, which we'll talk about in a minute. Excellent vaccine news, great step forward, makes 2021 look a little bit brighter than it did yesterday. What we're doing at the moment is postponing either awful pandemic measures, which we're inevitably going to have to bring in, or a terrible death toll and the overflowing of the NHS. Take your pick. We're either going to have a deep lockdown, or the NHS is literally going to overflow beyond capacity. So take your pick of those two. The public are behind measures on schools. The public are behind measures in terms of lockdowns. Labour need to, strap on a pair, grow a pair on this. They need to propose a zero COVID roadmap. They need to be bold. They need to talk about the fact that the government can do lockdown after lockdown, not get the systems in place that it needs to get in place in order to ensure we don't go back into another lockdown and another and another. They still haven't got test, trace, isolate. They still haven't done any number of things, partly because of dogma and ideology that they should have done a long time ago. Labour need to hammer them on that. The COVID disaster coming down the road into winter will rain on Johnson's political parade, the honeymoon after the Brexit thing. If COVID wasn't going on, Johnson would be in great political position right now. But because of the COVID disaster that's about to unfold yet further, it will rain on Johnson's political parade and ruin that honeymoon period. Now, on schools, millions of university, college and school students in England will face delays in returning to in-person classes in the new year, with some undergraduates not returning until February. So the Education Secretary gave a statement to Parliament this afternoon confirming plans, including a sharp reduction in the numbers of university students eligible to return to campus in the first week of January and more rigorous testing requirements. Secondary pupils will not return to their classrooms in the week beginning 4th of January, but most are expected to have an extended holiday. Let's have a listen to Gavin Williamson here. They will be doing, in the COVID hotspots, they'll close for 2 weeks. Primary schools in Tier 3 and below will be open as normal. Secondary schools will be closed to most in-person teaching until the 18th of January. Here's Gavin Williamson.
We'll be opening the majority of primary schools as planned on Monday, the 4th of January. We know how vitally important it is for younger children to be in school for their education, well-being and wider development. In a small number of areas where the infection rates are highest, we will implement our existing contingency framework such that only vulnerable children and children of critical workers will attend face-to-face. We will publish this list of areas today on the gov.uk website. I'd like to emphasise that this is being used only as a last resort. This is not all Tier 4 areas, and that the overwhelming majority of primary schools will open as planned on Monday. The areas will also be reviewed regularly so schools can reopen at the very earliest moment. Ongoing testing for primary school staff will follow later in January, and we will be working to establish an ambitious testing programme helping to break chains of transmission and reducing the need for self-isolation where students and staff test negative for the virus. All pupils in exam years are to return during the week beginning the 11th of January, with all secondary school and college students returning full-time on the 18th of January. During the first week of term, on or after the 4th of January, secondary schools and colleges will prepare to test as many staff and students as possible and will only be open to vulnerable children and the children of key workers. the 1,500 military...
You get it. It's all a bit of a shit show, basically. That's what we're saying. They should be closing the schools. It's ridiculous they haven't yet. I do not know what they're playing at. I mean, this lot couldn't organise a piss-up in a brewery, but the ineptitude and the incompetence does sometimes still astonish me. Thank you for joining me today. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel, drop a like on the video, get notifications on. We'll be with you every night, and I want you to be notified. I want you to also tell your friends. We'll be with you 7 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time tomorrow. This has been Wednesday evening's edition. We'll be with you for your New Year's Eve edition, the last edition inside the single market, before we exit the single market. And the actual, Brexit's technically happened, but the actual realities of Brexit will also have happened then. For all intents and purposes, we're still in the EU right now. We will not be come 11 PM tomorrow. So it'll be our last edition within the organisations and structures of the European Union. So we'll be having a special reflection on that, and what I think about that, and what the left should think about that more broadly. I'll be busting some myths, some Remain and Reform myths, and making the case for why the left should actually feel like maybe on balance this isn't too bad a thing. Okay, we will be back tomorrow. As I say, thank you very much for joining me. I've been Toby Lopati Mesme. This has been MesmePolitics, bringing you all the latest in UK and US politics from a leftist perspective. It's 7:31. Someone says, school's back, unbelievable. Yeah, I know, school's back. Absolutely unbelievable. I mean, don't count on them being back. Prepare for that U-turn, you know what I mean? Alright, that's it from me. I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you to everyone who got in touch, got involved.